Fortunately, we have everyone who is going to be here today in place, so we'll call this meeting to order. This is a meeting of the Economic Development Tax Board. I am Jim Dwyer, Chair of the committee or of the board, and I think most of you were in. Is there anyone here today who was not in the room on November 29th when we met for fiscal year 19? You were not. Are you a presenter today? No. You're observing?
Yes.
All right, good, thank you. So the reference to, here I go again. I learned from the transcript, we got an 80-page transcript of our meeting on November 29th, and it was a lot to absorb, but the main thing I took away from it is the recognition that I used the word "so" at the introduction of many sentences that I was never aware of. So, so there was some value in that. In any event, there is no court reporter here today. There will be minutes of this meeting that will be distributed, and there is a recording being made, a video and audio recording being made, and that's what these microphones are about. There is only one handheld microphone for purposes of enhancing the volume in the room, so we can use this if we need it. So that's up to you people to let us know if you can't, if we're not loud enough, all right? The microphones at the podium are, the one with the orange ball on it is for the video audio recording. The other will amplify your voice if needed, all right? So we are meeting now for the second time for the purpose of hearing presentations that will lead to requests for funding. And in this case, these requests are being made for fiscal year 2020, whereas what we did in November was for fiscal year 19, and we're going to get a report on the status of those allocations. But our role today is to hear presentations, to listen to requests, to ask questions as may become appropriate so that we understand the presentations, and then to vote on whether to approve the requests. And the last time was our first meeting, and we were sort of winging it. We were trying to feel our way through to a systematic approach to our business, and it seemed to have worked well. So I'm going to propose that we adhere to that same format as we used in November, that being that there are three major categories of presentations, and what I would propose is that, first of all, in order to offer some structure so that we can conduct our business and then wrap up, adjourn in a reasonable amount of time, I'm going to propose that we allocate approximately a half an hour to each of the three categories. That's not a rigid proposal, it's just a guidepost. And the idea would be that if, in my mind at least, that if there were 15 minutes or so of presentation, allowing then 10 minutes or so for questions, comments, and 5 minutes for discussion among the members of the board, and then we would vote on, in this case, agenda item number 3, neighborhood revitalization. And in that way, the people who are involved with that presentation, once the outcome has been determined, are free to leave, and they don't have to sit around for the rest of the meeting. Any concerns or objections or comments about any of that? Okay, then I will turn this over to the clerk for a call to order. I mean, we've got the call to order, but we're going to do
Would you like me to call the roll?
Yes, please.
Okay, thank you, Chairman. Tammy Holland.
Present.
Gary Gunter. Absent. Douglas Petty.
Present.
Alana Green.
Present.
Richard Bradley.
Present.
Tracy Johnson. Absent. Gregory Meyer.
Present.
James Dwyer.
Present.
There's the roll.
Good, thank you. So, Todd, do you want to give us some introductory comments?
Yeah, sure.
Thank you.
First of all, thank you. Thanks for taking time. And we got a couple short here. We had I believe Mr. Gunther moved out of the area, so we have to get him reappointed. I think he's a board rep from the Board of Aldermen. And our Tammy had something else to do today. But I appreciate all you showing up and putting your time and effort into this. It's greatly appreciated. To back up a little bit, we had our other meeting in November. Your actions went to the Board of E&A in December of last year, and they approved them. So then the money became available about January 1st for these operations people to be spending. As a result of that, having only 3 months to work on it, you can imagine, you appropriate a lot of money, and it didn't all, get appropriated yet. But while that happened, I want to remind you that this money stays in these specific categories. This money does not go anywhere else, okay? And as we gear this program up, we want to keep it moving and keep building on it. So each one of these reps will talk about what happened in their individual category and where they're at today. Only 3 months to spend the money. We have, if you have your budget sheet here, I wanted you to look at this. I want to try and pass this on. That we have FY19 money here in one category of $400,000, $410,000 that we're asking to reappropriate. So when I said I don't expect some of this to be spent by July 1st, this is some of it. And I think Don Rowe will be able to speak to, why we want to put a little more money in that category this year. So it gets confusing sometimes how these funds go in and out. So you appropriate them, they have till the end of June to expend them. If they don't encumber them or expend them, they go back into the pot, and they can't be spent unless you guys initiate action to reappropriate them. Is there any questions to that? Concerns? A lot of times when we have general revenue money, a different source, it all goes back into a big basket of money and gets all redone. I just want to make it clear that these funds stay in these categories. They do not leave. They don't buy Todd a new pickup truck or anything like that, okay? I think that's a very important issue to understand. The transit money, that's the 60%. That's going to continue to go into that fund and build up. And we need to work on our existing transit system and get some more plans before we move forward with that. The last item, the city infrastructure capital fund, that gets transferred over to the capital committee, which is met, and they have some infrastructure deals they're fixing. We're going to do a lease purchase for some trucks and that kind of stuff. And I forgot the building part that we're doing, Rich. We bridges. We're trying to get money to get the Compton Bridge done. So that's where a lot of that's being used. If there's no questions for me, if I confused you or something, you want to ask me a question now? Otherwise, I think you're about ready to turn it over to Don Rowe.
Any questions?
I do have a question. As far as the transit money, can you tell us how much has built up?
Yeah, it's a little over 30 million. I don't know the exact number in front of me here, but you can see there's 12.6, so you can virtually triple that. So we're probably 30 to 35 million.
So what is when you say you can virtually triple it, what is the source of the other 2/3?
I mean, it's 2.5 times that. My apologies. So we had a half a year collection. We had last year and this year. So it's right around 30 million.
In the pot now?
Yes, and it grows each year.
And then we're going to hear more, but you're asking for another $12,600,000.
We're not asking to appropriate it. It's simply going into the fund.
Correct.
On the line here, it says for future appropriations.
Got it.
So your action today is not approving to spend that money.
Right.
It's going in the bank.
Got it. Questions or
The
comments?
rest of it, we're trying to spend.
We all okay? All right, good. Okay, thank you, Todd.
All right, thank you.
All right, the first order of business then is item number 3 on the agenda, neighborhood revitalization. Who is going to present? Mr. Rowe. Mr. Rowe.
Good morning. Thank you, everybody. Happy to have been with you in November. Many people in the room know that I'm capable of filling up 80 pages of a transcript, but I'll be brief and hopefully effective today and eager to answer any of your questions. I am going to speak on that broad topic of neighborhood revitalization and, of course, part of my duty, and Love is going to talk about where we are with this. And the second is to be able to ask for funding into the next fiscal budget year. In the detail of this, there are a couple actions that are going on with that money. One is doing an overall St. Louis economic development strategy, and in the fine print, that is being done through my agency and in conjunction with the St. Louis Development Corporation. That had a little head start on us in that in anticipation of funding last year in July, there was an RFP issued for services, consulting services to do that. It subsequently has been awarded to a very talented firm, team of, from 3 members of the primary team are from out of town, but have experienced in doing this from all over the country. We conducted, SLDC conducted with that consulting firm our first meeting of the overall advisory committee for that plan last week. So we're appreciative of that moving along and being helpful to establish some research that we can base a strategy on for economic development. I'll make mention that in that plan, we've now determined that part of the work of that plan will be looking at districts and nodes through the city as to where and how economic leverage resources and economic leverage can occur. So I'll mention that as an importance to the neighborhood planning process. So pleased that that's going as robustly. And the first meeting with the advisory board was terrific, with a great discussion, because included in the description of that plan is that it's an equitable economic development strategy for our city. So that's good. That's with SLDC. You'll notice that incorporated in our work is also helping to fund SLDC and city efforts to stabilize LRA properties. There's a separate tax that is providing the money to do the stabilization, but we're funding the activity of getting that organized through SLDC. So pleased with that. The neighborhood planning, which is falling directly in the Planning and Urban Design Agency, which is I'm the executive director of, we're excited about that. We're excited about that because neighborhoods are the key building blocks of our city. The planning agency at one time had a staff funded of 27 people. We're down to 14 at the moment. And with me today is Cecilia Dvorak, who is one of those 14, a relatively new hire to us, and is one of the planners on staff. And we're pleased to have her because in a different mode than the economic development strategy is we're just getting built up to do the neighborhood planning aspect. So that's why Todd was talking about spending the funds is being judicious as we get things organized as to what we're going to do. And that's important because what we are going to do is a long-term effort to do neighborhood planning across the city in different neighborhoods. And we have to have a starting point. There's been in our history previous efforts led by city, and then there are current efforts that we've done in small partnership with neighborhoods, but now this will be the more robust process. So in the time since I last met you, we've been using existing staff to research, and Cecilia, to research what other cities have done, to remind ourselves what we have done, so we can establish the best practices. So as we unveil, we will be doing so with best practices in mind and a long-term strategy of how we're going to implement this in mind. I made mention that the citywide economic development strategy is going to be helpful because it's going to help us with identifying opportunities in areas of town where economic leverage might be something that's most advantageous in a key area for a certain type of thing. We need that to help drive our neighborhood planning. And we don't want to do this without a context that we have both currently the citywide comprehensive plan, which is a land use plan, and this economic development strategy. Another ongoing effort that you've read about is a effort to link neighborhoods through the Shotos Greenway and Great Rivers Greenway. Great Rivers Greenway is the entity and the project is Shotos Greenway, and that is ongoing at the moment to connect areas of town east-west and north-south through this Greenway project. It will be wrapping up, or not wrapping up, it's a long-term project, but the planning of it is very robust and active at the moment. There is some cross-pollination in the consultants that are working on that and working on the St. Louis Economic Development Strategy. That's a good thing. It's a very robust citizen engagement process. There'll be plans and more analysis and recommendation of the routes midsummer. So that leads me to saying in the funding for PDA, for neighborhood planning, we've asked for some consulting money, and specifically we've asked for funding for city employees, because we're going to institutionalize this, so it's ongoing. We have realized that when we're out in communities, we're doing things in their neighborhoods, and some of you know as I smile, we love maps to help do that. The IT director and I just this week finished our interviews and have offered a position that's partly funded by this tax and partly funded from the IT department to be our mapping guru for the city. We've been a little ad hoc of recent, and this will make it so that we can be competitive, organized, and effective, and up to best practices in doing that. So that's pretty key. Cecilia, in sort of her day job of doing the other things that we're doing and working on neighborhood planning, has been doing research, and I have a draft, I'm not quite ready to share it, of the research from other cities of how we see them doing it, and the volume of what might be an ideal scope of work for neighborhood planning. In that same light, in the city of St. Louis now, there are partners that we're now reaching out to work with. The Communities Buildings Network is one that's important. That is, they with St. Louis STL has been helping neighborhoods and been helping neighborhoods do some planning. So we've asked them to join in our team as to how to work on best practices. And I'm going to get the initials wrong, but Cecilia, the IFF, and the IFF stands for?
They said it doesn't stand for anything. They used to be Illinois, and now it's not. Illinois Financial.
So don't be tempted to fill in whatever blanks, but their financial house, they also have a pretty substantial grant from the Chase banks to be looking at identifying our neighborhoods and our characteristics. So they've become a partner in how we're going to go about this and been involved in that. Next week will be with the convening of a group from the American Planning Association, a national conference. Cecilia will also go. She will be in the workshops that are on neighborhood planning. I'm also invited as being part of the Big City Planners Institute, which is 25 planners from comparable cities across the country and cities that aren't comparable, like San Francisco and Seattle, but also the Bostons, the Pittsburghs. I'll spend time with them. We'll refresh our need to know what they're doing in terms of neighborhood planning, and so looking forward to that. We will be hiring line planners. Planning personnel acquisition takes a little while in the city system, but we'll be hiring and recruiting that through the personnel system. That's going to still take a number of months to pull that off. First off, we're also in our realm hiring somebody called a city planning executive, which will in essence be the supervisor for this effort, and looking forward to that. The money that you will see is that in fiscal year '20, we're asking for $2,110,000. And it includes, as Todd talked about, that we're reappropriating some that wasn't spent this year. We know and understand that part of that money is going to be really a unique aspect of this particular funding, in that there will be $1 million allocated to the Community Development Agency, which, as we know, administers our federal funds at the moment, the block grant funds. And those block grant funds from the feds have restrictions. So this will be something allocated through the Community Development Agency that will not have the restrictions with the federal government, will be applied to these neighborhoods where we've done planning effort and provide more resources to actually get things done. We talked last time that there's also a $50,000 line item in that we may need, and will be eager to do so, that there's $50,000 in that allocation to CDA to help prepare some neighborhoods to be organized, to help us in this planning process. So those are the asks. The asks are for staffing, again, and for money ongoing to have for the neighborhood planning consultants to do things like market studies and things that we don't have the technical expertise on staff to do that might be needed in a given community. And of course, there's going to be some needs for ongoing and maintaining the citywide economic development strategy. I will say, yes, and we have to pay for some fundamental resources. You may find that we're going to tweak this a little bit, because one of the things we're really focusing on is, are there new technical methods? And there certainly are, about how to do community engagement. Some of our neighborhoods get burnt out on how we've done things. There's now techniques developed that we want to get captured. Some of that may involve some investment in technology, and some of it may involve some investment in a little shuffling of line items. Like last week, there was a charrette, which is a planning name for a workshop, for a project that we're doing through East-West Gateway in the Beeville area about the street, the Gravois. One of the magic things to get community people to come out and be rewarded for spending part of the Friday night is to order some pizzas. So we in our community engagement might be needing to order some pizzas. So with that, Mr. Chairman, certainly entertain any questions.
Are there questions?
Yeah, I do have one.
Sure.
Good morning. And the question is, all the information you just mentioned, for the sake of transparency, where is that running narrative deposited?
Pardon me? Where?
That running narrative that you're describing now, for the sake of transparency, where can it be found? Where can the information that you're talking about, the projects that are being done, the running narrative, for the sake of transparency, where can that be found?
That's one of the purposes, I believe, for the videotape.
No. That's not what I mean. I'm in the room, I'm speaking general public. Where can the general public find the information that you're describing now?
I just articulated it. So I think that's one of the purposes of talking about court reporters and making a record.
No, he's not talking about the meeting. We're talking, I believe you're talking about the grand scheme of things. Where might one go to read about, or to see charts or progress reports or anything of that sort, if indeed there is any place to go to monitor or just catch up with you?
Right. One, as we're talking about, this is a status that we're doing with, at the moment, existing resources, hiring people, doing job descriptions, using existing staff to do some of the research I talked about. The embodiment of that will be eventually done when we convert this from draft to final.
And I appreciate it, and I hear you. Here's what I mean. At this particular time, for any entity, any public entity that is securing funds, information should be readily available to the public. Store it on a website, store it somewhere, appropriately labeled. So I'm really asking, if I was not in here and I was trying to find this information out as Joe Q. Public, how would I be fully aware of everything that you're saying? It's not a question of whether or not it's authentic. It's the question of access, transparency, and that, because that's the direction that everything needs to move in. It's just a fundamental question.
Sure. And I have to apologize. I have not posted my comments today to the web or yet posted this document or put something in structure that is out there on the web.
Well, here's something we may need to consider. If we're going to be stewards over this process, that's something that ought to be available. This should not be something that only we know. It should be clear for everyone going forward, because that's the only way it will make sense.
And we certainly agree.
Now, so in other words, it's not making an issue, just trying to set some parameters that makes it very healthy to eliminate potential questions that may come up. And so then that way you can say, here it is. That's really it.
I'd like
Certainly
to
agree.
try to divide the conversation into two categories.
Right.
And see if that helps. Our function is to listen to, comment on, and then act in some way on requests for approval of funding. And that part is easy, I think, to make public. I'm not sure exactly how we would do it, but it's all going to be of record on the city's television station, and there will be a recording of it, and somehow that could be, our minutes could be published, for example. That would be one way. What you're, I think, really getting at is what are the programmatic, what's the progress report mechanism for the programmatic aspects of what's being requested? Is that correct?
Yeah, I think access, awareness, so that someone can know. Pretty fundamental stuff. Nothing spectacular. Just says, if I needed to know, where could I find it?
Yeah, and I think
That's all.
the
That pretty much
undercurrent,
is it.
the
Sure.
undercurrent that I heard in your comments was that transparency is an important issue these
Right.
days.
Right.
So it doesn't mean that you necessarily have been doing that, but maybe there is, if you consider this, it may be possible to figure out a way to issue a report monthly or quarterly or.
Yeah, going forward, just.
Yes, exactly. We can't
That's-
correct
yeah,
whatever
yeah,
has occurred or
absolutely.
not occurred, but
Correct.
we can.
I don't think I've done anything wrong until this date, so
We're not talking about anything wrong. We're
Right.
talking
So-
about
so
people understanding what you're doing.
agree wholeheartedly. One of the things that another guy in khaki pants and I just talked about is that at the moment now, we're talking about the budget and the requests.
Right.
As we get rolling into this program, we're doing things on the web and posting updates and saying, we're here, we're doing this, these are the people that are participating, will be part of our DNA, doing that.
I think there are two illustrations that just may be helpful to you. One that I recall from the last meeting, and I think it was your question, it had to do with where, I think you identified three, without saying where they were, you, in your original proposal in November, said that there would be three neighborhoods that would be subject to the planning exercises, correct? And there was a question posed about which neighborhoods, and there wasn't an answer at that point. It may still not be an answer, I don't know. But I remember your comment being, well, could you please put some emphasis on making those, designating areas that are north of Del Mar? And so that is a suggestion that has come now twice, basically, from this board for you to consider. And when you have identified those neighborhoods, I think your point is that should be.
Well, yeah, and really, I don't want to give any impression that I have some extra ground, but I also know that it impacts everyone that lives in St. Louis City. So everything. And to become just government friendly, that's just a part of a process where if citizens move in one direction, government moves there, then now you develop even stronger relationships. And I think that pretty much is it as we continue to go forward. And I can tell you a little bit about IFF just as an FYI. IFF historically had targeted nonprofits and underserved communities. So they're very interested in, so that's just an FYI. Just as an example of getting some things in. You just happen to be the first person up. I mean, I think that pretty much is it. That's all. That's all.
So the rest of you,
Yeah, I mean, they
get
know
ready.
what to do now. It's easy.
Everybody get
It'll be
ready.
easy for them.
Right. Piers, Friday night guy? No, I appreciate that. Like I said, I'm excited about, people will know I have a focus on neighborhoods and spend a lot of time out there in the neighborhoods versus upstairs on the second floor, so.
Right.
Yeah.
So I will suggest that next time you're number 3 on the agenda. Okay, are there any additional questions?
Yes, Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I do have a question.
Yes.
Good morning, Don.
Good morning.
Thank you for the information that you shared. It would be really interesting to know about the success the other cities have had with their urban planning projects. You did mention that the draft that you have is unavailable for us to see. I would be very interested in reading more about those success stories. When do you think that that might be available for us to see?
Cecilia will do some jumping jacks, and I'm teasing, is that we've been a little tied up in another major project that's concluding right now. We'll be at this conference, and the mission when we get back from the conference to have gotten some in-person feedback from the entities that we've researched online to finish the draft up in the next 5-6 weeks.
Thank you. Looking forward to reading it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Additional questions or comments?
Don, one of the things that I'm aware of is that LRA doesn't seem to have the personnel to really do a very good job of marketing properties that they have. And so could you just expand a little bit on how this will help them perhaps have greater capacity?
Certainly. So as you know, and I made reference to the second floor. So the second floor is our euphemism to say that all the development agencies are co-located on the second floor. Planning and Urban Design is there. The Community Development Agency is there, which Alana used to head, and we're still looking for a new executive director of that, and the St. Louis Development Corporation is there. So we work together cooperating and as a team. So your comments about LRA is, the task is big in that, we don't, LRA and Otis Williams' shop, the properties that they get are majority come from this tax foreclosure issue. It's not something that they've sought. So the resources to be able to get ahead and really market those properties and come to grips with the many that have to come down and the many that could be stabilized to be a little bit more market enhanced. The money from the Eco-Devo tax is going to LRA to be able to do that, to do those inspections of buildings so they can get categorized as to how to deal with, market them, and the ones that we want to stabilize, use the other source of money to get those stabilized. So I think they're kind of excited to be able to have resources to do that as opposed to the juggling that we've done for so long.
Okay, because one of the concerns I have in terms of reaching out to neighborhoods, some of the neighborhoods that presently you might be working with, there are other neighborhoods that they don't even have the ability to, get into this process. So it would almost take an effort to go to those neighborhoods and say, how can we help you to revitalize your area? Because you have some areas of the city, for example, in terms of public safety, they might be trying to generate private funds in order to have cameras, things like that. There are other neighborhoods, they don't have the ability to attract that kind of private contribution, things like that. And there are probably many neighborhoods that are in need that they don't have a way of going, I can go on the city's website and I can find where I can reach out to the city, LRA and other agencies to help our neighborhood to organize and try and build ourselves up.
Absolutely. So we have a little juggling act here, is we don't want to stop doing great things every single day and do it a little better. And then the neighborhood planning process will help us be a little bit more organized in a longer range future. So why I say that is helping LRA now work with, have people to do outreach to neighborhoods, and in many ways, there's some criteria about the worst of the worst needs to be addressed and things like that to do immediate, and then there's the more strategic that we'll do through the neighborhood planning process. But,
Does that answer your question? Yeah, good. Any additional questions? So I use the word "so" again. The second bullet point under neighborhood revitalization indicates that Mr. Yocum is going to be speaking, or you've covered his,
I have covered, Mr. Yocum is sitting back here.
oh, I see, good, good.
But
All right, terrific. All right,
hopefully I've covered his
so
aspect.
that then concludes the presentation
Yes, please.
for neighborhood revitalization, correct?
Yes.
And then we can move forward to consider the request, which is line item number 2 on the budget and proposed allocation sheet that each of you has, identified as draft dated yesterday. Neighborhood revitalization, the 10% factor is prescribed by the ordinance. The $410,000 is money that was allocated by this board previously, but unspent, and is being proposed to be carried over into fiscal year 2020, along with $2,110,000 of new allocation, for a total of $2,520,000, correct?
Yes.
All right.
The total underline line number 2.
So what I'll do is ask for a motion on that. Is there someone who will offer a motion to approve that?
A second.
Well, you make the motion.
Oh, I propose, Mr.
Thank you.
Chairman,
Is,
to second the motion.
all right, is there a second?
I'll second the motion.
Thank you. Is there discussion? Hearing none, I will call the question. All those in favor of the motion to approve $2,520,000 for neighborhood revitalization as described by Mr. Rowe, please signify. Oh, we're going to do a roll
Would you
call?
prefer I call the roll?
Yeah, I've forgotten that you prefer a roll call.
Okay, Tammy Holland?
Yes, I approve.
Okay, Gary Gunter is absent. Douglas Petty?
Yes.
Alana Green?
Abstaining due to the former relationship, that CDA.
Okay, Richard Bradley?
Aye.
Tracy Johnson is absent. Gregory Meyer?
Aye.
And Chairman Dwyer?
Question, procedural question. Would you normally expect the chair to vote other than in breaking a tie?
It commonly, not, but there's nothing that precludes you by any bylaw of this, or,
All right, fine. I'll vote in favor.
the motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you all, and we continue to partner with Alana in her new role. Thank you.
Good. Thanks, Don.
Mr. Chair, could I have a procedural question?
Yes.
So, for Ms. Burkett, I kind of thought that the chair of a committee was kind of like functioning like the president of the Board of Aldermen, who always has a vote and votes whether or not there would be a tie or not. So I thought the chairman would always vote.
Well, she said that there is no prohibition.
Okay.
And so I would prefer to vote. I
Right.
just wanted
I
to
was gonna say.
clarify the point.
Very
All
good.
right, thank you. All right, the item number 4 on the agenda is workforce development.
Good morning. Thank you guys so much for being here, and Mr. Chairman, thank you so much for having me. SLATE has not spent any of the money yet. We've spent our time with planning for program expansion, planning for writing grants so that we can use our money for our job match program, and also hiring staff. We have planned programming in the different neighborhoods using our recreation centers. We thought it was important to take job fairs and other program offerings into the neighborhoods. We also, during the planning stages, we gathered the voice of our community and our clients that we serve to really figure out what else do they want to hear about, what else do they need to put them on the road to prosperity. We know giving them a job is not enough. Giving them a job is what I'm tasked with, but we also want to give them a future and a way out of generational poverty. So in hearing that, we know that when we do job fairs, we also need to have financial assistance available. We know we need to have access to banking available. We are working with the court system for men and women who have child support issues. So we also know that when they come to a job fair, they want to be empowered, but they want their children to get empowerment, get academic help, where the entire family is being empowered at the same time. So we went on a listening session when we did this. We do not have the information up, but hearing from you today, we will have a tab on our website called the Economic Development Sales Tax and the narrative of everything we propose to do, and we will make sure that we update that monthly for you. Right now, we'll make sure by the end of the week, we get the information updated by what I spoke with you about. So we are working now to hire within the city. Historically, SLATE has been using just a ton of service providers, but we think it's definitely important to hire city workers, city people who work, play, and live, and have a vested interest in our community. So we are opening up city positions, and that's what I'm working with the personnel department with now. I have annual reports for everybody that I want to give you now, so that in air of transparency, and also so that the board can also see progress, because moving forward, my report to the Board of Aldermen and my annual report, I will be having this information in there. And I have to kind of pause because I have to share my time with the lovely Miss Russell, but I want to pause right now, answer any questions, and distribute my annual report to you.
Thank you.
No,
Questions?
no, thank you.
Actually, I have a question. With some of the audits that are being done, are you finding areas where there might be perhaps some restrictions on your funding, say from the federal level, but they are valuable, and so with funding that we might provide, you could continue programs that maybe don't always meet some of the federal criteria, but
Yes.
would benefit from having that funding source available?
You just gave me goosebumps when you said that, because that's exactly right. When we receive federal money and state money, everything is so restrictive. We have to fill out 500 pieces of paper just to give somebody $20 to catch a bus. We can't, some people's homes are not on a bus route, right? So I'm like, let's call them an Uber and bring them here to our center so we can fill out the paperwork and get them training. Oh, well, you can't call them an Uber. Just different things like that. Or right now, I want to be able to give police checks to everybody. So we're having an emergency job fair on Saturday, and we're doing 8 different locations for this job fair, which has never been done before, thanks to the forestry department, the parks department, personnel department, the mayor's office, all of us working together to do this. But we need to be able to have background checks. People don't have $9 to get a background check to get a job. So with this money, I'm able to get background checks. And so some of this, it gives me goosebumps that you just said that, because that's definitely what helps. It is definitely going to help a lot.
Okay, thank you.
Sounds like a setup question.
Yeah.
We,
Thank you for that text.
Because we definitely need 100 people. And so we need 100 people. We have to be unapologetic and very intentional and very aggressive about our efforts of employing our community. And we can't let a $9 background check hold progress for our citizens, because our citizens have been in generational poverty, generational unemployment, generational lack of. So we have to be aggressive about stopping that. We've also decreased the age to 16 years old. So the mother, the father, and the kid can come get a job at the city of St. Louis. That's amazing. Like, where do they do that at? And so, yes, thank you.
So good. Any additional questions? Okay, thank you very much.
Good morning. When I last met with you, you provided approval for $2.2 million to be utilized for youth empowerment services programs. Since that approval, I want to give you an update on what has occurred. An RFP was developed by the Department of Human Services to ask respondents to propose either new projects, continuations, enhancements, or expansions of services under 4 categories. It was career exploration, life skills, work readiness, experience, employment, access to college, vocational, technical, educational supports. That RFP was released via the City Journal. It was on the city's website. Notices of the RFP were sent to youth-based organizations throughout the area and to other funders to allow them to forward that to agencies that they might be aware of. The RFP was released in February. The closing date for the receipt of applications was on March 14th. The results of that RFP, pretty overwhelming. We received 27 proposals, totaling $6,137,336. So the task of the reviewers was to go through those RFPs, review them very closely to make certain that the key investment areas that we were seeking were in fact contained in those RFPs. In addition to the reviewers who the body of that committee was dictated in Board Bill 227AA, and those representatives were individuals from SLATE, CDA, St. Louis Public Schools, President of the Board of Aldermen's Office, and the Department of Human Services. The RFPs were provided to the auditors and to the committee, and the auditors that I am speaking of are 2 auditors that are on staff within the Department of Human Services. The auditor's role was to go through all of the supporting documentation, particularly the balance sheets, the audits that were requested, income statements, et cetera, to determine whether or not those entities who were proposing projects were low, medium, or high risk in terms of their ability to carry out the projects and to function if they didn't have all of the money up front. Of the reviews that were done, all 27 were reviewed. Only 5 of those 27 RFPs were determined to be non-responsive for a variety of reasons. 22 of the projects have been reviewed, scored, and we have selected through the committee's assistance 9 respondents who will be awarded contracts if they accept. The 9 I can disclose at another time, I am told, because we've not yet had those discussions and contracts haven't been executed. Those 9, however, cover projects that will go through all of those 4 investment areas. Again, that was career exploration, life skills, work experience, job readiness, job experience, and employment, and then provide access to college and other supports. The request that I am making here today is for, well, let me back up. The contracts have not been awarded. The contract development will begin once the Board of Estimate and Apportionment approves those 9 contracts. And so the actual contract date, the start date for them will be sometime in May, June of 2019. There are 2-year pilots that you approved that we seek. So the first year's pilot will be May, June 2019 through April 2020. The second year pilot will be May 2020 through April 2021. That will encompass the $2.2 million that you awarded and approved. I'm here today to ask for your approval for funds that become available for July 2019 in the amount of $1,150,000. The plan to utilize those funds is to use the same RFPs that we received, because they were so enormous and the projects were exemplary that were being proposed, to use those that are not being offered a contract, review those again, not changing the eligibility criteria, but looking to make sure that we have a broader range of youth to be served, and honing in on some specific services that the 9 that are being awarded contracts may not have covered to the satisfaction of the Department of Human Services and the reviewers. If those dollars are approved for use by this body, we will then go back to the table to review those applications again, to come up with another grouping of proposals to be awarded contracts that would be entered into in July, August of 2019, and they will also be awarded for 2-year pilots. In addition, I'm here to ask for your consideration to allow the Department of Human Services to use a portion of the $1,150,000 to appropriate funds for 1 staff person who would handle contract compliance. This person would either be a contract compliance officer or program specialist, and their role would be to make certain that the programmatic monitoring of all of the contracts that we are entering into, any technical assistance that we need to provide to those contractors, both programmatic and fiscal, would be taken care of during the terms of their contracts. The auditing of those entities, the fiscal auditing, would be done by the auditors that we already have on staff. I'm here to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you. Questions? I'm
Can we offer a motion?
I'm seeing no questions over here. How are we doing on the left?
So, can we offer a motion?
Certainly.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I neglected to say something. I don't have the details in front of me right now for that position, but we can guarantee you it will not exceed $60,000 and will most likely be less than $60,000. That's with salary and benefits.
Right. I'd like to offer a motion to approve, because this is really a ditto.
Yes.
Okay.
So we have a motion. Is there to approve the request? Is there a second to that motion?
I second the motion, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Is there any discussion? I have one technical question, and it's probably obvious, but it's escaping me. On the proposed allocation sheet that we were given prior to the meeting, it indicates that in the category of workforce development, the requested amount is $2,110,000. You just mentioned a figure of $1,150,000.
That allocation includes both the Department of Human Services and SLATE.
And SLATE, and I guess I didn't make the note, SLATE's. I see, I got it. Thank you. You're looking, all right, fine. I wasn't looking down far enough on the sheet of paper. Okay, no question.
Okay, thank you.
So are there any questions or comments on the motion? I'll call the question. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Would you like me to?
Oh, yes, I'm sorry. Thank you, thank you. Roll call vote.
Tammy Holland,
Yes, I approve.
Gary Gunter is absent, Douglas Petty,
Yes.
Alana Green. Yes. Richard Bradley.
Aye.
Tracy Johnson is absent, Gregory Meyer,
Aye.
and James Dwyer.
Aye.
Vote carries unanimously.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So obviously, I've been running meetings for a long time in which.
Because this is the least common way.
Yes. The next order of business,
I may have a order, I think there's some confusion, being, brought to my attention. Could Mr. Walterman speak to that?
yes.
Yeah, I apologize. So I believe your last motion approved the money for human services. And I don't believe we had a motion to approve the $960,000 for SLATE. Okay, when Ms. Prince was up here, when Dr. Prince was up.
Yes.
So I don't think we had any action of the board yet to do that. So I kindly request that you reconsider what Alice presented and consider a motion to approve that 960, if I understand what happened here correctly.
And my intent was one presentation, one motion. And they were up at the same time as
And
a package.
that was how we were structuring
Right.
things. So we
Right.
want to make sure that the minutes reflect what we actually did. So I'm glad we're clarifying this. Are you okay with that now?
Yes, do we need a motion to recognize the 960 was allocated to SLATE? Would that help?
Let's do that. May I have a motion to that effect?
So moved.
Thank you. Second?
Let me
Yes.
ask the question. When you initially opened the meeting, you talked about categories.
I did.
And so by virtue of the categories, that motion was inclusive of everything in the category of workforce development.
That was my
So I would
thought.
not suggest that it necessitates an additional motion based on how you introduced the meeting. Now,
Okay, well, we
but
wanna make
she's
sure-
legal, but I'm actually following the script of how you presented it.
I understand that, and I agree with you, but I also want to make sure we haven't, by default,
Right.
confused things. We want to clarify things, and so if there is any issue in anybody's mind about whether the $960,000 was approved, we want to clarify that. And if it's a redundant motion, it really is not of any consequence, I don't think.
I think it depends on how the motion was given. So I don't recall exactly the wording of the motion, but if the motion did reference human services only, then there needs to be a motion that references SLATE in addition.
No,
It just
it was
depends.
not.
It was not?
No,
Okay.
no. No, it was not singled out as human service.
Okay, so
Right.
then there shouldn't be an issue. Right.
So perhaps for purposes of clarity, Barb, was your notation of what we were voting on, was it workforce development, that whole category?
Well, I have a motion to approve the request of DHS and SLATE. I don't know that this document was necessarily incorporated into it, but it was presented.
Chairman, if I could.
Yes?
Mr. Petty, if your motion was to approve the 2.11 million, then it's okay. I didn't
Right,
hear a number.
right,
But that would be both categories together in your motion, and I believe that's what you're
Yes.
assuming that was happening,
Yes,
right?
yes.
So your motion was to do that, and your second was to approve the 2.11 million,
Yes.
correct? And that's
Yes.
what you guys voted on, right?
Yes.
We're done.
And because it would have been much the same thing under neighborhood revitalization. It's
Correct.
because it's, yes,
Multiple
I can
categories.
absolutely see how you would agree with
Yes.
that.
Yes.
I just didn't hear that.
yes, sir,
I appreciate
yes,
it.
sir.
Well, it's
I get-
important that we get it right, so we sure.
Exactly, that would be my only comment, that if there's anything that needs clarification, this would be the appropriate time to
Exactly.
make the clearest recommendation as this matter goes on.
All right, good. Thank you. And thank you for your patience, Judge Edwards. We are ready for you.
Thank you. Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Thank you so very much. By way of background, there are three numbers that we all know. There are three numbers that are universally used in every state in America. Those numbers are 911. Today, I am here to request a total of $2,110,000 for public safety infrastructure. By way, again, of background, the existing 911 system in the city of St. Louis was installed in September of 2007. The latest software was updated in 2010. On an average, over the last 5 years, there have been more than 750,000 calls to 911 in the city of St. Louis. The purpose of the financial and monetary request is to develop a new public safety answering point. That answering point would be located at or near Jefferson and Cass behind the fire department headquarters. The objective of that PSAP is to combine all public safety calls and perhaps even add on Citizen Service Bureau at some time. It shocks the conscience that we have 3 locations for 911 at this time. But it shocks the conscience more to know that if there is a 911 call for police services, that somehow makes it to the fire department. The fire department has to put that citizen on hold and call 911 itself in order to get those types of services. To date, we have utilized $300,000 as the annual service costs for 911. We're asking for another $100,000 to operate a new and separate mass communication type of system that would allow a two-way system between our public safety offices and citizens that may even be able to talk to citizens about traffic, certainly can talk to citizens about serious emergency situations. That new mass notification system, we have developed an RFP, however, it has not yet gone on to the street. The PSAP, I believe, will cost about $20 million. We are hoping to leverage and obtain a bond. We've talked to the comptroller's office. We're looking for a 20-year bond to service or to try to obtain the $20 million that will be needed for the PSAP. The RFP for the PSAP hit the street today, and we are in contact with the Board of Public Service, one of your members, just to make sure that we're able to get competitive bids for this thing, because there are a couple of options here, one with the tower and one with moving a tower. So we are investigating all of the things that are necessary. I believe that the RFP covers all of those types of things. And so, again, we believe that the most important thing in the city of St. Louis right now is public safety. And the public safety always somehow ends in those three numbers, 911, whether it's a heart attack or whether it's a criminal activity, or in some cases, whether your child is misbehaving. And so it is imperative that we continue to do this. I believe that it closes the trust gap. I believe that it makes 911 more efficient. The worst thing that can happen in anybody's life is that you call 911 and the phone rings and rings and rings, or you call 911 and you get put on hold. So this is critically important to public safety in the city of St. Louis. I will answer any questions that you might have at this time.
Are there any questions for Judge Edwards? I do have a question.
Yes, sir.
In the grand scheme of things, under a medium-level set of expectations, when would you expect realization of this, the comprehensive aspects of this program to be in place?
You know what, I am not in a position to just answer that question. We have the RFP out on the street for, what, 60 days? I forget.
So you have an RFQ, which is a request for qualifications, because you select a consultant, and that's determined by federal law. We'll select a design consultant for about 4 weeks. We're in the selection process. We'll negotiate a contract. You probably have 9 to 12 months worth of design and study time, maybe a little more than that. And then once we get into a construction phase, you could be 24 months for construction. So by the time you would get it designed, studied, and built, we could be 3 to 4 years away.
Thank you, Mr. Bradley.
Thank you.
I have a question. Is what we're seeing here a reauthorization from funds that were not spent from what we authorized at our previous meeting?
The initial funding would be yes, I believe. We have not, did we already put our first 1.7 in?
So the funds you appropriated in 19 are being encumbered and used for this consulting contract. These are all new funds.
All new funds, yes.
Thanks.
It would only show up if there were a reauthorization of unspent funds from the previously approved figures. That would
They'd
be
show
in
up
this
there.
column, all right? So these are all new funds requested for fiscal year 20.
Okay.
I have a question. During this interim, he talked about a 36 or 48 month window. What is what could be done during this interim that could alleviate some of?
Well, cross-training, some, just making sure that we can get people in place, keep folk employed, trying to support what we have. This has been a problem for 20 years. This problem just did not start today.
Right.
And so what we're trying to do is make our workers more efficient, providing them with the types of things that we can provide, short of building a new combined system.
Is there any money just sitting around the way 45 talks about money that's sitting around that could be slid over to public safety?
Yeah, we have, thanks a lot, I appreciate that. We have 39 employees, and we probably need 100 employees in 911. Yeah, so the 911 system, yeah, that 911 system is being implemented now, that
Okay,
first $300,000.
Okay, all right.
So, one observation, as someone who uses 911 from time to time, is that it seems to me that the discretionary aspect of the dispatcher's role is so important. And therefore, it seems to me that qualifications of people who are put into those slots and training for
That's a
those
training
people
issue,
is so
absolutely.
important to an effective system.
Yeah, that's, and you're absolutely right. President Bradley had a bad experience. He didn't say it, I said it. He had a bad experience with 911. And we have to make sure that we train our people, make sure that they are sufficiently knowledgeable about what to do and what not to do. And so it's an issue of training. It's an issue, again, of availability. These people are overworked. They're overworked and they're underpaid. And so we just have to make sure that we have resiliency inside of our 911 system, where the people will come to work tomorrow and do the best possible job that they can do. And so it is very important, you know, one mistake or one bad word or one misinformation, or, I mean, anything.
All of the above.
All of the above.
Exactly.
Can be devastating, end in fatalities, end in, this is critically important that we get it right. And we have to get it right at this stage, because this is the first stage. People often talk about police officers being on the front end. The 911 caller is actually on the front end, because if they dispatch to the wrong location, or if they give the wrong information, things end very badly sometimes. And so we're trying to improve that. And I think that if we can improve 911, we improve public safety overall in the city of St. Louis.
Sure.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Just a point. And so, building this PSAP facility, and the judge talked very detailed about this, would put all these people within one facility and make them work together, as opposed to being in separate facilities around the city. So I think we would all agree if we could put them under one roof and provide them with uniform training and uniform procedures, the system would work better for the long term.
And it seems to me it's also a matter of team building and letting people realize the importance of their role, and therefore maybe they come with a different spirit than they might otherwise.
Absolutely.
So, all right, that all sounds good. Is there, since there are no other questions or comments, is there a motion on the request for authorization for a new round of funding in the amount of $2,110,000? May I have a motion?
I motion because we don't want to wait. I don't like trying to dominate things, but we need to do this as quickly as we can. I so move that we approve.
Thank you.
Twice the amount he's requesting.
You know, Doug, I was actually waiting on it. I'm like, wait a minute, you didn't ask for $5 million.
Yeah.
There are a lot of setup deals here today. I don't know what's going on. So, for clarification purposes, we're talking about $2,000,001, not double that. Is there a second to that motion,
I
please?
second that motion,
Thank you,
Mr.
Tammy.
Chairman.
Any further discussion? Call the question, roll call vote?
Tammy Holland,
Yes.
Gary Gunter is absent. Douglas Petty?
Yes.
Alana Green?
Yes.
Richard Bradley?
Aye.
Tracy Johnson is absent. Gregory Meyer?
Aye.
And James Dwyer?
Aye.
The motion carries unanimously.
Terrific.
Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any other business to come before the board today? Hearing none, we'll consider this meeting adjourned in record time.